It was a risky decision. Some would say it was even reckless. It was totally irresponsible. How can you make such a risky, reckless, irresponsible decision? Nevertheless, we made the decision. And so far, thank God, it's worked out. We made a very risky decision when we decided to only do one annual fundraiser. We decided to compress an entire year's worth of fundraising into one campaign. We only do one annual fundraiser at the Torch Center, and that's happening right now in 2026. The fundraiser is happening right now at givetorch.org. You can find a link in the description of the podcast. Every donation is doubled. Every donation is matched. We didn't always do only one annual fundraiser. Of course, Torch, we're a nonprofit organization. The only way we can continue the phenomenal work of Torch and the Torch Center and all the amazing podcasts and all the amazing rabbis and all the amazing activities here in Houston and the phenomenal outreach worldwide, the only way we can do that is with donations. There are people who believe in our mission, who want to support us, who want to see our mission of spreading the Almighty's name and His Torah throughout the world. They want us to continue, and they want to join with us, and they want to invest in us, and they want to partner with us. And we're very appreciative of every single partner. But we used to do multiple fundraisers a year. We'd have a dinner. We'd have all sorts of other fundraisers. We try to meet with donors regularly and ask them for the partnership and their friendship and support and donations. And we made a decision. It may have been reckless. It may have been risky. We decided to change our philosophy. Instead of doing fundraising throughout the year, let's do one big fundraiser. We'll do it online once a year, and hopefully we'll cover the lion's share of our expenses in one fell swoop. We made that decision more than 10 years ago. And ever since then, every year we have only one fundraiser. And 2026 is happening right now. GiveTorch.org. Every donation is doubled. Every donation is matched. With the help of the Almighty and with your generosity, over the last 10 years or so, we've been able to concentrate all of our annual fundraising efforts into one campaign. And the rest of the time, we can focus on our mission to connect Jews and Judaism, to spread the Almighty's Torah the world over, to blanket the entire world with the Almighty's Torah. If you believe in what we do, if you enjoy what we do, if you enjoy the podcasts, if you've listened to some of our shows, the Parsha podcast, Torah 101, This Jewish Life, Ethics, Mitzvah, History, and all of our other amazing shows from the Torch Center in Houston, Texas, and you want this empire of Torah to continue, we need you. We need your help. We need you today. GiveTorch.org. Make a donation. Give us your support. Give us your vote of confidence. GiveTorch.org. Give what you can give. Support us. Empower us. Boost us. Fuel the torch. Our nation, we have a very rich spiritual legacy. We have a very rich heritage, and we have a very bright, shining destiny. And it's our job to hold up that torch high and to spread the light of Torah to every corner of the world. And here at the Torch Center, we're doing that day in and day out, week in and week out, year in and year out. We realize it's our job, it's our sacred mission to pass the torch to the next generation. That's our organization, Torch's mission. And right now, it's the 2026 annual fundraiser, and we need you to help us fuel the torch. Our rabbis have tremendous dedication to the mission. They dedicate their lives to this, and we need to support them. We need your support. We need your partnership. We need your friendship. We want you to join us at GiveTorch.org. So you can hit pause on the podcast and you find the link. It's in the description of the show. You can't miss it. And give us support. Give us a boost. Give us a vote of confidence. Encourage us. Support us. Be generous with us. Help us. Ensure that the great work of Torch continues. And all the phenomenal podcasts continue. We don't do ads. We don't charge for anything. We don't charge any membership or embership, I like to say, for Torch. How do we pay for things? How does the torch stay lit? We have friends. We have partners. We have people who believe in our mission, who want to help us. And I want you to be that person. I want you to join the club. And you know what? Many of y'all are club members from last year. I want you to continue your support. And you may be feeling right now, you may feel like an urge welling up within you. Well, someone else will support. I'm sure they'll have some donors. They don't need my help this year. No. We need your help. Yes, your help. The mission of Torch is too important to take a year off. And right now, every donation is doubled. It's matched. There's no better time to make a big investment in Torch. Many of y'all have never reached out. I get many emails. Long-time listener, first-time emailer, rabbiwolbajim.com. A lot of y'all are first-time emailers. I want many of y'all, all of y'all who haven't given yet, to be first-time donors, first-time partners. If you've given in the past, thank you. You're an incredible partner that we cherish. We want your help again this year. If you haven't given, now's the best time. GiveTorch.org. Give what you can give. And then you know you're a partner in every single one of our efforts. There are thousands of people, tens of thousands of people who enjoy the Torah, the rich, powerful, exceptional Torah that's changing people's lives. They're benefiting, they're learning, they're studying, they're growing, they're advancing. They're becoming more educated and informed Jews and believers, and they're becoming more educated in their Torah because of every donor. You have an enormous impact because there are people the world over who are studying Torah, who are growing, who are developing and deepening their connection with the Almighty, thanks to the efforts of Torch that you supported. You can have an incredible impact. All of those merits accrue to you, the partner, the donor. It's the best bargain that there is. But there's only one way to have a slice of the action. Right now, GiveTorch.org. Make a donation. Every donation is doubled. Every donation means you are a partner with us. If you donate, you're joining our team. We'll give you an email at torchweb.org if you want. If you don't donate, you're missing the opportunity. Isn't that a shame? It's a terrible shame. So in short, what's happening? It's the annual Torch Fundraiser of 2026. It's happening right now. Where is it happening? GiveTorch.org. G-I-V-E, give. T-O-R-C-H, torch.org. You can find the link in the description, or you can type it in your browser, givetorch.org. And if you're still not persuaded, but you're willing maybe to be persuaded, just send me an email. RabbiWolbajim.com. And say, Rabbi Wolbe, I need to be persuaded to go to givetorch.org to make a donation to become partner. And give me your phone number, and I will call you up, and I will persuade you, and you'll make a donation. GiveTorch.org. We need your help. Every donation is doubled. Every donation is matched. It's the only annual fundraiser. Once this is over, I'll be happy, you'll be happy, and we won't speak about it till like February or March of 2027. Isn't that amazing? Help us get there. GiveTorch.org. My email address is rabbiwolbe@gmail.com. We are up to the last installment, the final installment in our study of Rambam's magisterial introduction to his magisterial commentary to Mishnah. Of course, Mishnah is the foundational book of oral Torah. That's when Rabbi Judah the Prince made the decision the most consequential decision of writing down, of canonizing the oral Torah. Rambam, when he was a very young man, wrote a complete commentary to all of Mishnah, and we were going through his introduction to his commentary to Mishnah. And hitherto, a lot has been covered. He sketches out for us the history of oral Torah, how it worked and how it works. And he has this very long essay, this treatise on prophecy, how prophecy works, how to differentiate between real and fake prophecy, and the various different components of oral Torah. The laws of Moshe at Sinai, disputes and how they originate, why dissenting opinions are included in the Mishnah. We had a brief overview on the 6 orders of Mishnah and all the different books of Mishnah. And finally, last time we had the analysis of the further development of oral Torah, the different books that are of Mishnaic era, the Talmud and what's included in that. And the last part, this is actually part 11 for those of y'all counting, Rambam's going to focus on his own contribution. Why did he write his commentary to Mishnah? And he ends with a fascinating set of appendices and heuristics. Very interesting, very fascinating, a lot to cover. So let's begin. The Rambam writes that there's a great need to author my commentary to Mishnah. Of course, the commentary to Mishnah is the Talmud. The Talmud itself, he told us, is a commentary to Mishnah. And the Talmud explains and elaborates upon the Mishnah. But unless you read the entire Talmud, there are many different ideas, laws, contexts of the Mishnah that are found in the Talmud that if you just read the Mishnah, even if you have all the logic in the world, if all you have the Mishnah, you would not know all the conclusions and all the explanation and all the elaboration found in the Talmud. So if someone wants to read the Mishnah and they want a commentary and they don't want to read the whole Talmud, there is a need to plug that void. For example, the Talmud very often, it tells us something about the Mishnah that we wouldn't know unless we had the Talmud. For example, this is very common. Bameh dvarim amurim. That's the words. When is this Mishnah applied? This Mishnah applies in this and this case. The Talmud very frequently identifies a specific case to the exclusion of a different case in which the law of the Mishnah applies. If you just read the Mishnah, you wouldn't necessarily know that. Similarly, very often, the Talmud tells us that the precise text of the Mishnah needs to be altered in order to truly understand its meaning. Now, this is a unique concept. The Talmud very often tells us, Chisuri michsara. There is no way to understand the Mishnah unless you amend or tinker with the text of the Mishnah. And by the way, the Rambam doesn't say this, but one of the reasons offered for this fact, like why would the Mishnah omit words? Why does the Talmud say you need to add words in order to understand the Mishnah? One of the answers, very interesting, given to explain this phenomenon, is that the Mishnah was designed to be memorized. And sometimes a sing-song that would be used to memorize the Mishnah, it just wouldn't rhyme or wouldn't match with the amount of words of the Mishnah. So they would deduct some words from the Mishnah, and they would maintain an oral tradition. Oh, in this particular Mishnah, in order to truly understand it, you have to add this and this words. And the Talmud spells it all out, of course. But if you just read the Mishnah and you don't have that tradition and you don't have the Talmud, you wouldn't know what the Mishnah is referring to. Similarly, very often, very, very often, the Talmud identifies the author of a Mishnah. This Mishnah is in accordance with this and this opinion. Implied, there are other opinions that disagree. So if you want to read the Mishnah and understand it, and you don't want to study all of Talmud, you're going to be missing a lot of context. And that's why, says the Rambam, I wrote this commentary to Mishnah so you can study Mishnah and know all the things that the Talmud tells you about that Mishnah without resorting to read the Talmud. And there are four main benefits or four main purposes of my commentary. Number one, to explain the Mishnah, to explain the words of the Mishnah. And he tells us, very interesting, he says, if you spoke to someone who's very intelligent, a great genius, and you said to them, hey, here's the words of the Mishnah, explain to me this Mishnah. Unless they know all of Talmud by heart, and unless they actually open up the book of Talmud to read it, they wouldn't know what the Mishnah means. Because the Mishnah, unless you have the explanation of the Mishnah, can often be quite indecipherable. And how many people can we expect to know all of Talmud by heart? You often see, like today we have the books of Talmud, and you have 4 lines of Mishnah, and 4 pages or 5 pages of elaboration, of analysis, of debate, of discussion, of investigation in the Talmud. So how are you supposed to understand the Mishnah without the Talmud? Which is the clear explanation of that Mishnah? You have to be completely well-versed in the Talmud in order to understand the Mishnah. Moreover, says the Rambam, very often, the explanation of one Mishnah relies on many different teachings in all of Talmud. So unless you really know all of Talmud, you very often will not know the interpretation, the explanation of a single Mishnah. And therefore, the first purpose of my commentary, says Rambam, is to explain the Mishnah. Number 1. Number 2, the second benefit of my commentary is to identify the halacha. Very often, you have a dispute in the Mishnah. Rabbi so-and-so says X, Rabbi so-and-so says Y. Or maybe there are 3 opinions, or even 4 opinions. Well, what's the halacha? Which opinion do we follow? Very often the Talmud itself would say that. I'm going to include that, says the Rambam, in my commentary to Mishnah. And that's the second benefit. So you know what's the bottom line, what's the halacha. The halacha follows whom? Number 2. Number 3, my commentary will serve as an introduction, says Rambam, for someone who is beginning to study the depths of wisdom. I will teach you the methods of how to investigate words, of how to understand explanations. You will be trained in how to engage in Talmudic analysis and deductions. There's a word that we use for this. It's a very common aphorism you hear in the great yeshivos. That first, you have to learn how to learn. And once you learn how to learn, then you can learn. There's a certain training that's needed to prepare a person for how to understand the intricacies and the profundities of the Talmud. And with my commentary, says Rambam, I will help you to do that. And that'll be the third purpose of the book. And finally, even someone who studies all of Mishnah and studied all of Talmud and is an expert, and they want to be able to quickly review it. So you can study just the Mishnah and my commentary, and that will serve as a tool, as a means to make sure that you remember it. In my commentary, says Rambam, I will select only the true interpretations. Very often the Talmud has a very long debate. Does it mean this or does it mean that? And it will investigate to the end of all the investigations, both opinions. And ultimately it will select, this is the more favored opinion. Says Rambam, in my commentary, I'll cut just to the chase. We'll follow only, I'll delineate only the true explanations, and I will repel all the explanations that appear to be rejected by the Talmud. But I'll also explain to you the reasonings and the background the backstory of the disputes amongst the disputants. What's the reason for the debate? And in accordance to whom does the law follow? I will be brief in my words. I will not confuse the reader. Brevity is a hallmark of this commentary. And if your heart is like stone, I'm not trying to explain it to you. I'm only trying to explain those whose heart are open and receptive to understand. And I will include the full text of every Mishnah, and only then will I explain that particular Mishnah, that particular law, following the objectives of my commentary. And once I finish one law, I'll move on to the next one, and so on until I finish all the laws of the Mishnah. What if the words of a Mishnah are easy, they're self-explanatory? In that case, I will simply write down the Mishnah, and I will not add any commentary because it's self-understood. What about when there's a dispute between the academies of Shammai and Hillel? We know that invariably the law follows Hillel, not Shammai, with the exception of a few well-known instances. If you see a dispute in a Mishnah between the academies of Shammai and Hillel, I don't need to tell you that the law follows the academy of Hillel. That's a well-known rule of thumb. It's a heuristic. Whenever there's a dispute, academies of Shammai and Hillel, the law follows the academy of Hillel, and only in the few rare instances where the law follows the academy of Shammai, only then will I spell out, oh, in this case, it's an exception. Here, the law follows the academy of Shammai. When there is an unattributed Mishnah, it doesn't say Rabbi so-and-so says X, Y, or Z. It just says a law. Well, then, you know the law follows that unattributed Mishnah. I don't need to spell that out for you. Every once in a while, though, you have an unattributed Mishnah that the law does not follow. In those Mishnahs, I will explain, oh, this is an exception to the rule. Typically, unattributed Mishnahs we follow. Here is the exception. What about when there's a dispute between an individual and the masses? There's a rule, we follow the Rambam, the masses. If you have all the sages of the academy are saying one thing, and there's one individual who's the dissenter. Typically, there's a rule, Yachid v'Rabim, an individual versus the masses, the law follows the masses. Nevertheless, says the Rambam, I'm going to actually identify that the law follows the masses in those cases. These are the rules that he lays out for himself, and he ends off his introduction with a prayer. The Almighty should direct us in the path of truth, distance us from the opposite of truth, with the help of the lofty and glorious God. That's his commentary, and that's his rationale for the commentary, and those are the rules that he's going to employ in his commentary. And then he says, okay, I want to add some more thing to my introduction. He has 10 appendices that are very interesting and very useful for someone who wants to study this properly. But he tells the reader, these are useful, but not quite as useful as what I wrote in my introduction hitherto. But if you want to understand Mishnah completely, truly in its entirety, here's some good information to know. I find it absolutely fascinating what he chooses to include in his list of appendices at the end of his introduction. He starts off by saying there's 10 different subjects I want to address. Number 1, enumerating the sages who are mentioned in the Mishnah. How many sages are there? Who are the sages? If you polled 100 yeshiva students, I imagine, unless they read this, none of them would know the answer to that question. How many sages appear in the Mishnah in the context of a law that they taught? That's the first appendix. The second appendix is the enumeration of sages who are mentioned in the Mishnah, but not in the context of a law, rather in the context of an event, a story that happened, or a lesson that they taught, or a homily that they preached. Okay, that's appendix number 2. Appendix number 3 is identifying the various pedigrees of the sages of the Mishnah. Number 4, organizing all the sages of Mishnah into different blots of sages based upon the different generations of sages. The period of the Mishnah, it goes from the beginning of the Second Temple era, that's 420 years, up to about 150 years or so after the temple is destroyed. So it's more than 500 years of history. And all the sages are included in this one grand corpus, but they didn't obviously all overlap with each other. So the Rambam does, he identifies for us 11 different cohorts, 11 different generations that span these 500 plus years. Which of these sages are in the first block, the second block, and so on? Identifying the teacher-student relationships amongst the sages. This was very interesting. The different naming schemes. There's so many different names and types of names that are found in the Mishnah. The Rambam organizes all the different types of names and why they're given those types of names. The stature and titles of the sages of the Mishnah. The different lands and different professions and occupations that are included in the titles of the sages of the Mishnah. Number 9, appendix number 9, is identifying which sages are most likely to be disputants. Of course, sages of a different cohort are more likely to have overlapped with other sages of the same cohort. But which sages typically dispute with each other in the Mishnah? And he lists them by the order of how often they dispute. And finally, organizing the different sages by amount of times that they appear in the Mishnah. How many sages appear a lot, and he gives a whole list of all the sages that appear only once in the Mishnah. And he identifies in which books do those sages that have only one appearance appear. These are the 10 appendices that he offers us, and I find it to be absolutely fascinating because it's like this complete reference book for Mishnah, all done 1,000 years ago. It's a reflection of Rambam's just absolute mastery of all of Talmud and all of Mishnah, and this incredible ability to organize and to index all this information. How many sages appear in the Mishnah in the context of a law that they taught? I don't know what I would have guessed if I had to guess, but the Rambam lists them all by name. All the sages throughout all the Mishnah that appear in the context of a law, it's 91 different sages. And he starts to list them. Rabbi Eliezer, son of Heuristics, Rabbi Eliezer, son of Jacob, Rabbi Eliezer, son of Rabbi Yossi, the Galilean, Yehoshua ben Prachia, and so on, Yeshua ben Hananiah, Yeshua ben Karcha, all these great sages, one after another. And he says, I'm not organizing it by chronological order, by alphabetical order, I'm just giving you all the sages. 91 different sages. Now, if you count them, you find it's only 90. Presumably, it's because the architect of the Mishnah was Rabbi Judah the Prince, who is mentioned, but it's not included in this list. He included 90, but when you include him as well, it's 91. Okay. That's the first section. Lists the names of the 91 sages that appear in the Mishnah in the context of a law that they taught. The second section, that's the number of sages who are mentioned in the Mishnah, not because of a law that they taught, but rather because of an event that happened, or because of a teaching, like a moral or an ethical teaching, or a homily that they taught. So Rambam himself says this. We have a book of Mishnah called Pirkei Avos, Ethics of the Fathers, Chapters of the Fathers. And there are many sages that appear in that book. They teach an ethical, a moral, a philosophical lesson, but they don't appear anywhere else in the entirety of Mishnah. How many sages teach lessons, but don't teach any laws anywhere else in the Mishnah? It's a total of 37. And of course, he lists them, again, not by chronology or by any of the system. It's just a list of 37 names. So the total number of sages mentioned in the Mishnah is 12891 plus 37. And then he adds, there are two more names of people that maybe could be confused as sages that appear in the Mishnah, but I'm not including it in my list, because one of them is Elisha ben Avuya, otherwise known as Acher. He was the one sage that went awry. He became a heretic. And therefore, even though there is a teaching in his name, it's not appropriate to include him amongst the rarefied list of 128 sages. And there's someone named Menachem, a friend or a colleague of Shammai. There's no teaching or lesson that's taught from him, so he's not part of our list. So these are, again, appendices. Very interesting. 91 sages that appear in the Mishnah in the context of a law. 37 sages that teach a lesson, but not one that is law-based. Okay. The third section, pedigree. Some of these 128 sages are from royalty, from nobility. Of course, Rabbi Judah the Prince, he was the prince. And he's from one of the most important lines in our history. His son is Rabban Gamliel. His father is also Rabban Gamliel. And his father is Rabbi Shimon. And his father is Rabbi Gamliel. And his father is Rabbi Shimon. And his father is Hillel. And these were all presidents or princes of the Jewish people. And Hillel is the famous Hillel the Babylonian. We know Hillel. He's the founder of the Academy of Hillel. And these are all descendants of King David. So this is one section of sages that originate, that hail from royalty. Okay, there's a different set of sages that have a different pedigree. There are 4 of these 128 that are either converts or come from families of converts. And they are Shemaiah, Avtalion, Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Meir. He's like organizing the different sages by the different groups of pedigree. How many of the 128 sages are priests, are Kohanim? Again, most people wouldn't have any idea some of them are identified as Kohen, like Rabbi Hanina, Skana Kohen. Rabbi Hanina, the vice Kohen Gadol. He's one of the sages of the Mishnah. But how many of them are there? So the Rambam says, I'll give you the total list. There are 14 different sages that we know to have been priests. Now again, some of them are identified by name. Most of them, it's just because the Talmud happens to tell us a story about them. The Talmud happens to reveal, we know in some fashion, in some way, that they have priestly pedigree. So we have the family of Rabbi Judah the Prince, the family of Hillel. We have the sages who were converts or from families of converts, the 14 sages who were priests, and the rest of the sages, we don't know anything else about their pedigree. They are Israelites. Again, that's an appendix. The next appendix are the various different generations of sages. And it's important to know, like, which sages overlap with which other sages. And how do we categorize the different generations? So he tells us that the first generation of sages included in the Mishnah, it starts with Shimon HaTzadik, Shimon the righteous. And he overlapped with Dosa, son of Hartinus, or Hyrcanus, people pronounce it, or Hyrcanus. And what's interesting about this is Rabbi Dosa ben Hartinus, he lived a very long life because he also overlapped with Shimon the righteous, who was at the beginning of the Second Temple era, and he overlapped with Rabbi Akiva, who was after the temple was destroyed. He lived a very, very long life, and there's a very famous and dramatic episode of the Talmud where Rabbi Akiva has an interaction with a very, very aged sage named Rabbi Dosa ben Harkinas. That's the first generation. The second generation is Antigonus, man of Soko, and Rabbi Elazar ben Charsum. And the third, and the fourth, and the fifth, and the sixth, and the seventh, 7 generations, and all the various different sages that were the first 7 generations of sages whose names are mentioned in the Mishnah. And these 7 cohorts, these 7 generations, were all in the Second Temple era, and they weren't there past its destruction. And then he lists the generations that were following the destruction of the Second Temple, and he lists 4 generations of sages, a total of 11 different generations of sages. That is another appendix. And again, I'm not going through all the names of the sages. You can read it inside, but he lists all the names of all the sages in each respective generation. What about teacher-student relations? Who was a teacher? Who was a student? So Rabbi Judah the Prince, the architect of the Mishnah, he was also a student and also a son of the previous prince, Rabban Gamliel. So there's a successive line of fathers' sons who doubled as teachers' students. We know that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had 5 famous students. You recall, perhaps, in the Ethics of the Fathers, chapter 2, there's a long list of teachings where Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai interacts with his 5 students. Rabbi Akiva, he's a student of Rabbi Eliezer, but he's also a student of Rabbi Tarfon. But they were more like colleagues than teacher-student, which is why Rabbi Akiva would honor Rabbi Tarfon, and he would call him his teacher, and Rabbi Tarfon would simply call Rabbi Akiva by his first name, Akiva, because he was half a colleague, but also a student, but also an underling. But they still had disputes amongst them. Now, Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Shimon are students of Rabbi Akiva, but Rabbi Meir also studied by Rabbi Ishmael and also studied by others. And Rabbi Yehuda was a student of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Again, he's trying to kind of organize for us the tree, the coaching tree, if you will, of the sages of the Mishnah. When the Mishnah says, Rabbi so-and-so said in the name of Rabbi so-and-so, which happens many, 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 many times, all over the place it happens. The Mishnah is identifying for you a teacher and a student. A student said a teaching in the name of his teacher. He was obviously a student of that person, and so on. Okay, names and naming schemes. We have so many sages that have the same first name. There's lots and lots of Rabbi Eliezers. Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua, Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, Rabbi Elazar ben Hyrcanus. What if the Mishnah just says Rabbi Eliezer? Which one of them is it? So there are certain rules of thumb. When it says Rabbi Eliezer, it invariably refers to Rabbi Elazar ben Hyrcanus, teacher of Rabbi Akiva. When it says Rabbi Yehoshua, there are many Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Yeshua ben Pracha, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Rabbi Yeshua ben Hanania. But when it says Rabbi Yeshua without any appellations, it's a reference to Rabbi Yeshua ben Hanania, who was a student of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, one of the 5 students of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yehuda, there's lots of Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Judas. That's invariably a reference to Rabbi Yehuda, Bar Eloi, son of Eloi. But sometimes the Mishnah identifies him in a different way. When the Mishnah says there was once a pious person, whenever it talks about a pious person, and it doesn't identify which pious person is being mentioned, that's always a reference to Rabbi Yehuda, also known as Rabbi Yehuda, son of Eloi, also known as the pious one. What about when it says Rabbi Elazar, not Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Elazar? That's invariably a reference to Rabbi Elazar ben Shmuel. Rabbi Shimon is invariably a reference to Rabbi Shimon, son of Yochai. The 3 Bens. Sometimes it says Ben Azai, Ben Zoma, Ben Nanas. Doesn't identify who the person is, just who their father is. The three Bens are all Shimon's. Shimon ben Azai, Shimon ben Zoma, Shimon ben Nanas. Ben Beseira, that's Rabbi Yoshua ben Beseira. Ben Bagbag, that's Rabbi Yochanan ben Bagbag. When it says Yochanan the high priest, when that name appears in the Mishnah, oh, that's a very famous Yochanan the high priest. That's a reference to Yochanan, son of Matisyahu, Matthias, famous for the Hanukkah story, for the Hasmonean revolt. We know that story. That great sage is the same Yochanan high priest featured in the Mishnah. And the Rambam identifies some of the reasons why some of the nicknames were given in the Mishnah. There was an episode, the Rambam informs us, and it's too long to give you the details, but there's an episode where Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Nassan, they did something inappropriate to Rabban Gamliel, the father of Rabbi Judah the Prince. And because of this episode, Rabban Gamliel banished them from his academy. And therefore, whenever these sages are mentioned, Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Nassan, it often conceals their identity as almost like a punishment for that unmentioned episode. And therefore, when it says, Acherim Omrim, there are others that say. Who are these others that we don't know who they are? The Mishnah says others, Acherim Omrim, others say. That's invariably a reference to Rabbi Meir. And when it says, Yesh Omrim, there are those who say, that's a reference to Rabbi Nassan. And again, they're both, they have their identities sometimes concealed because of this other event that the Rambam doesn't want to tell us too much about. And there are other ways in which Rabbi Meir's identity is concealed. Sometimes it says, Mishum Rabbi Yishmael Amar Talmud Echam L'fnei Rabbi Akiva, which translates as, in the name of Rabbi Ishmael, some student said in front of Rabbi Akiva. Whenever it gives that introduction to a teaching, that too is a reference to Rabbi Meir. When it says, Hadonin L'fnei Chachamim, those learned ones in front of the sages, it's reference to 5 different people. And again, it delineates those 5 people. Oh, and you should know that Rabbi Meir is the same person as Rabbi Nehorai. The word Meir means light. The word Nehorai means light. His actual name is Rabbi Nehemiah, but because he brought so much light, he was given these 2 nicknames of Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Nehorai. Okay. What about when the Mishnah says Chachamim, which means sages? That can refer to lots and lots of different people. Sometimes it refers to an individual. Sometimes it refers to a group of sages. Sometimes the Talmud tries to identify which sage is being referenced to in the Mishnah when it says sages. Now, why would an individual be labeled as sages? Sometimes there's a teaching taught by one individual, but it gained such universal acceptance that it became adopted by the masses, and therefore, even though it's a teaching that originated by one person, it is called Chachamim, as if the entire masses have taught that teaching. The Academy of Hillel and Shammai. In Hebrew, it's not called the Academy of Hillel and Shammai, it's called the house, or the household. Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel. Why would the Academy of Shammai and Hillel be called the house of Shammai and Hillel? Oh, that's because a person's students, they're like members of their family. And that's why it's like his house. These are like his household members. That's how close the connection is between teachers and students. When the Mishnah uses the term rabbi says, well, which rabbi? We have 128 people that could qualify. When it just says rabbi, it's a reference to Rabbi Judah the Prince. He's also known as Rabbeinu HaKadosh, our holy teacher. When it says just Rebbe Omer or Rabbi says, it's a reference to him. When the Mishnah uses the framing be'emes amru, in truth they said, that's reference to a law taught by Moshe from Sinai. It means a law that you will not find, or you will not find a clear indication of in the text of the written Torah. And finally, in this section, the Rambam tells us, again, rules of thumb of Mishnah. Mishnah heuristics. If there is an unattributed Mishnah, Mishnah just says a teaching. So, is there a particular sage that taught that teaching? It can mean all sorts of different things. It can mean a law that all the sages agreed to derive that particular law. Or it can mean a law that all the sages have a tradition since the times of Moshe for that particular law. Sometimes an unattributed Mishnah is the teaching of Rabbi Meir alone, and there are sages who disagree with it. And sometimes it could refer to a teaching of a sage other than Rabbi Meir, and the Talmud will identify, okay, this Mishnah, in accordance with whom does it follow? Next, appendix. Titles. If you scan these 128 names, you'll find different titling schemes. Some of them are called rabbi, like Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Tafon, Rabbi Yoshua, and so on. Some of them are called Rabban, which is also like rabbi, but it's not spelled differently. It's Rabban. And some of them don't have any title at all. Hillel doesn't say Rabbi Hillel. Shammai doesn't say Rabbi Shammai. Shimon HaTzadik, Shimon the Righteous, doesn't say Rabbi Shimon HaTzadik. Why is there these different naming schemes for the different sages of the Mishnah? Says the Rambam, the highest level, the greatest of the sages, are simply called by their first name. So Hillel is just Hillel. Shammai is just Shammai. Because of their amazing greatness and amazing stature, there's no title, there's no honorific that can possibly fit their greatness. Just as we don't have names for prophets. We don't call Rabbi Samuel, he's just Samuel the prophet. Moshe, it's just Moshe, it's not Rabbi Moshe. Because there's no name that we can conceive of that can possibly fit their greatness. The highest name is just their name. And that's the highest degree of greatness of a sage. And there are 22 different sages in the Mishnah that are in this class. And the Rambam lists all those sages. And then he tells us anyone in the Mishnah you find that has a first name but it's not part of our list, then there's some other reason why their title is omitted, but they're not on this highest level. The next highest level is Rabban. It's higher than Rabbi, it's Rabban. And typically that's reserved for the leaders of the academy, the presidents of the Sanhedrin. So all the sages in the family of Hillel, they're known as Rabban Gamliel, not Rabbi Gamliel, Rabban Gamliel, Rabban Shimon, and so on. I believe that with the exception of one sage, the title Rabban is reserved for the family of Hillel. The one exception to that is Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai. He was not part of that family, but he was on this level of this second cohort. And the third level are the ones called Rabbi, like Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, and so on. But then there are other terms, like Abba. Abba means father, but it means like a beloved one. Abba Shaul. He's always known as Abba Shaul. And there are times where there's no honorific, and that's okay. So, for example, Shimon Achi Azariah, Shimon, brother of Azariah. It's not Rabbi, and it's not any other title. It's just Shimon, brother of Azariah. Or Elazar, man of Bartusa. Okay, that's just different names that are featured in the Mishnah. And sometimes they're called by their profession. Nachum the scribe, Rabbi Shimon the spinner of threads. He doesn't mention this, but Rabbi Yochanan Sandler, Rabbi Yochanan the shoemaker. This is a common stream in the Mishnah to name some of the sages after their particular profession, or some are attributed from the place that they come from. Man of Ono, man of Bartusa, man of Hadad, man of Tzureda, man of Yerushalayim. And the reason why these particular sages are given that title is because they were the most outstanding person of that particular city. It's like the first citizen of Jerusalem, first citizen of Ono, and so on. Some of the sages are known by the names of their father, like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, Rabbi Elazar Bar Shimon, and so on. And some are known by the name of their brother, the brother of so-and-so. And some are known as, like Rabbi Yossi HaKohen, the Kohen. Again, the Rambam is just kind of laying out for us all the different naming schemes found in the Mishnah. And then, in the next appendix, he organizes the batches of disputants by order of frequency of disputes. The most common disputants in the Mishnah are Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Yossi. And sometimes they argue with each other. And sometimes they argue one against another. Sometimes all four have a dispute. And sometimes there are others that disagree with these four. So, for example, Rabbi Elazar, you'll find him very frequently. He disagrees with these four, but not as often as they disagree with each other. And then the next batch, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Elazar, and Rabbi Yoshua. All sorts of disputes between these three. And then comes the disputes between Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Yishmael, Rabbi Tarfon, and Rabbi Elazar ben Azar. Common, but not quite as common. And next, in frequency of disputes, the academies of Shammai and Hillel. And then the disputes between Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, and Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. And with the exception of rare instances, these are the most common disputants in the Mishnah. And finally, the last appendix is identifying the sages by their various instances of appearances in the Mishnah. So some sages appear very often, like Rabbi Meir, like Rabbi Yehuda. Some of them appear very infrequently. For example, Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. The Talmud tells us that his teachings are kav v'naki. They're few, they're small, but they're clean. Whenever there's a law, a teaching from Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, in those few instances, the law always follows his opinion. And then he gives us a list of 37 sages who appear only once in the entire Mishnah, and the books in which they appear. And with that, he ends his introduction to the Mishnah. When you have all these appendices, it might not be as valuable for someone who maybe never studied Mishnah, or studied a little bit of Mishnah. But if you really have this panoramic overview of all of Mishnah, you could really fit these lessons into the various different understandings of the inner dynamics of the Mishnah. We have concluded Rambam's sprawling, magisterial introduction to Mishnah. Now you have everything you need to study the Mishnah yourself. We understand the context of the Mishnah, where it fits in, the history of oral Torah, how it was developed, how it was organized, 6 orders of Mishnah, 60 plus books, the mechanics of the Mishnah. Now we know all the different names and the different sages and the different disputants and so on. We have whatever we need to become experts in the Mishnah. And of course, once we take a deep dive into the sea of the Mishnah, we develop an urge to go into the oceans of the Talmud. This is a very foundational work. Rambam's introduction to his commentary to Mishnah, he explains a lot of the mechanics and the inner workings of oral Torah. Please God, we will continue our study of great foundational works on Torah and Jewish philosophy. I already have a plan of what we're going to do next. Stay tuned. This is a project of your friends here at the Torch Center in Houston, Texas. We want to know more about the Torah and how it works, the philosophy of the Torah and how it works. And please God, we'll continue that to become experts in Torah 101 with the help of the Almighty together from the Torch Center in Houston, Texas. My email address is rabbiwolbe gmail.com. Please send me your questions, your comments, and your feedback.